It has become increasingly common to tear apart film projects while they are still in production, based solely on released trailers, casting announcements, or creative concepts. The progressive sphere anticipates a lack of diversity, cultural appropriation, or underlying racism, while the conservative sphere criticizes a perceived lack of faithfulness to the source material and existing fan base, excessive overrepresentation of minorities, poor dialogue direction, and a lack of plausibility. So let us examine the matter more closely, based on what is currently known about Christopher Nolan's new project, The Odyssey.
Christopher Nolan, one of the few living mainstream directors still capable of delivering interesting, complex, and well-crafted films, has launched a project that is already stirring controversy: a new adaptation of Homer's Odyssey. One could argue that the material itself is almost too straightforward for Nolan's previous body of work, which has largely been defined by controversial and complex characters, layered and intricate narratives, and interpretations shaped by circumstance and perspective. Not that The Odyssey is not a great work, but taken as a whole, it is ultimately a rather direct, heroic epic, built upon very simple motivations of its characters and offering comparatively little detailed character development. It is, above all, a narrative set within a historical framework, centered around fundamentally simple conflicts whose deeper complexity only truly emerges within the thoughts of the reader. Odysseus lives a happy life as king of Ithaca, beside a beloved wife and his first child. When he is called upon to join the campaign against Troy, he initially attempts to avoid military service. Odysseus ultimately succeeds in securing victory in the Trojan War, yet, afterward, wishes only to return home to his former life. Along the way, however, he encounters countless obstacles born from his own hubris, emotional entanglements, temptations, and weaknesses, all of which repeatedly prevent him from reaching his destination. This is excellent material for blockbuster adventure cinema, but less so for deeply complex character studies, because Odysseus is driven primarily by homesickness and repeatedly fails due to his own pride, comfort, or temptation. Which raises the central question of Nolan's adaptation. Is he aiming for a pure retelling of the story, a character study of Odysseus, or a combination of both? Every form of storytelling is built upon two principles: drama, which is meant to captivate the audience and allow them to identify with the characters, and a pedagogical message that the viewer ultimately takes away from the experience. Anyone adapting an already existing work essentially has two options: to tell the story within its original historical context, or to transfer its drama and message into an entirely different setting. In other words, the story is either staged faithfully within its historical framework, or it is relocated into a completely different temporal, geographical, or narrative context. In both cases, the audience can still perceive the story as plausible. Plausibility is the harmony between the expectations of the viewer and the images presented on screen. Narrative plausibility is one of the essential requirements for an audience to remain engaged with a story's internal world. Once a story loses its plausibility, it also loses its emotional hold over the viewer. If a story is set within its historical context, modern elements cannot suddenly appear within it. If the story is moved into a modern setting, historical elements lose their internal logic. The moment something no longer makes sense, the audience's attention immediately shifts away from the narrative itself toward resolving the contradiction. And in the end, only the contradiction remains. That is why consistency and credibility are so important if one wishes to avoid creating unnecessary controversy within the audience. At the same time, every form of creative work is fundamentally protected by artistic freedom. This means that an artist, in the act of creation, is not subject to social or political obligations. Society has no right to dictate which colors an artist uses, which stone a sculptor carves, which perspectives a filmmaker chooses, how a work is staged, or whom a director considers suitable for a role. Acceptance or rejection belongs solely to the audience of the finished work. It is absurd that public debates about artistic projects are conducted before the final work has even been released. Criticism of the production process belongs to those producing the work, while criticism of the finished product belongs to those consuming it. Consumers may reject the product, and producers may ignore criticism of it. But consumers do not determine the creative work itself, and social demands do not determine commercial success. So, let us discuss some of the controversies surrounding the current debate as objectively as possible. Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy. Homer's Helen is not truly a character in the modern dramatic sense, but rather a symbol, the most beautiful woman of her age. It would therefore seem logical to cast someone capable of embodying that role visually and through sheer screen presence. Someone who is not merely exceptionally attractive, but who also possesses an aura of irresistible grace and allure. Beauty, however, is an attribute almost entirely shaped by the standards and ideals of a given society and its era. Extraordinary beauty would therefore be something that transcends the prevailing ideal of its time. Typically, such beauty emerges through features that do not simply conform to the dominant societal type, but rather complement and elevate it through rarity and distinction. What was considered especially attractive within the context of ancient Greece is by no means a universally agreed upon standard today. Homer himself provides no detailed physical description of Helen, focusing instead on the effect of her presence and charisma. Accordingly, Helen could absolutely have been portrayed as a black beauty. Such a depiction would not necessarily be historically implausible, considering the extensive trade networks and cultural exchange throughout the Mediterranean world. Nevertheless, one may still reasonably hold reservations about casting Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy, because although she is undoubtedly attractive and possesses undeniable glamour, she arguably lacks the youthful aura and particular ethereal presence commonly associated with the figure of Helen. This is also influenced by the nature of her previous roles and the audience perception attached to them, which have tended to emphasize character depth and dramatic substance more than idealized beauty itself. The next criticism is fundamentally difficult to understand. Zendaya fits a believable interpretation of the goddess Athena remarkably well in terms of appearance and physical presence. She embodies precisely that balance between preserved youth and credible maturity, combined with the dynamism, movement, and charisma one would expect from a cinematic portrayal of a goddess. Anyone criticizing this casting choice should be able to explain clearly and specifically why. Whether Zendaya can fully realize the role on a dramatic and performative level is something that can only be judged once the film itself has been released. At the final sentence, finally the cast of Elliot Page as Achilles, I would consider that genuinely absurd. Not because of Elliot Page being transgender, but because of the physical presence traditionally associated with the character of Achilles. Achilles is portrayed as the greatest warrior of his age, a figure whose near invincibility stems from being superior to every other fighter, combined with an overwhelmingly intimidating personality and battlefield presence. In cinematic terms, the role depends heavily on the audience believing in that physical and psychological dominance, particularly within large-scale choreographed combat sequences. From that perspective, one could argue that Elliot Page lacks both the physical stature and the commanding screen presence commonly associated with such an archetypal warrior figure. As a result, conflict with audience expectations would likely be unavoidable, making such a casting decision difficult to understand for many viewers. Modern language in antiquity. This is a classic plausibility error. Either the setting is relocated entirely, or it is not relocated at all. Otherwise, the result either appears unintentionally ridiculous or leaves the audience with a lingering sense of dissonance for the remainder of the story. There is also no convincing narrative reason to do this, unless the intention is to undermine the seriousness of the setting itself. The same principle applies not only to spoken dialogue, but also to songs and musical performances staged within the world of the story. Historical and mythological accuracy. Here as well, the principle of plausibility applies, along with the question of purpose and the extent of the intervention. A few adjustments made to improve the visual impact of a scene are not necessarily harmful. The question, however, is why such changes are needed at all when the historical context already provides clearly defined aesthetics, equipment, and visual references. Still, artistic modifications can certainly work, as long as they do not create a plausibility problem for the audience. As for the released trailer itself, it contains no scenes featuring Helen, Athena, or Achilles. The dialogue direction, however, already appears questionable in places. The Laestrygonian sequence, with gigantic figures wearing what resembles medieval plate armor, creates a significant plausibility problem. Matt Damon as Odysseus and Tom Holland as Telemachus strike me as serious miscasting choices. Both feel too old, too heavy in presence, and fundamentally atypical for the roles they are meant to portray. In Damon's case, the distinctly modern American persona is difficult to separate from the character, while Holland lacks the gravitas typically required for more weighty dramatic roles. The almost Sauron-like portrayal of Menelaus also feels inappropriate. From the perspective of the historical and mythological framework, the Greeks are entirely justified in launching their campaign against Troy. One does not abduct a king's queen and publicly humiliate him without consequences, at least not in the world of antiquity. Taken as a whole, the outrage surrounding the project appears largely exaggerated to me, aside from the possibility of a questionable casting choice for Achilles. Whether Helen embodies a light-skinned or dark-skinned ideal of beauty is ultimately irrelevant, so long as the audience can emotionally and visually accept the portrayal within the context of the film. The dialogue direction may at times seem borderline questionable, but it still has to be judged within the context of the finished work as a whole. A few artistic adjustments to the historical setting are unlikely to ruin the experience, provided they are not taken to excess. Christopher Nolan makes exceptional films, and there are already far too few filmmakers capable of doing that in our time. Perhaps we should slow down a little and wait to see the final result before rushing to judgment. Perhaps we should all calm down and reserve our criticism until we have actually seen the finished work. Perhaps we should pause for a moment, allow the fruits to grow, and simply appreciate their taste. And if we do not enjoy them ourselves, there will always be others who will. Culture is the cool shade on a hot day. It grows like a tree and flourishes only when it is cared for. Culture grows in sensible hearts.